All right, so today we're tackling something that's, well, it's pretty out there. We're talking about dry fasting for weight loss. And yeah, that means exactly what it sounds like. No food and no water. So in this explainer, we're going to break down the claims, the so-called science, and all the warnings from a pretty popular online guide on this whole thing.
So, right out of the gate, this is the promise that the source material makes. Shed fat like butter. I mean, wow, it's a seriously bold claim, right? It's designed to grab your attention and suggest you're going to see results, and fast. The guide definitely doesn't beat around the bush. It frames dry fasting as this incredibly powerful way to drop weight, like yesterday.
Okay, so just how powerful are we talking? Well, the source actually puts a number on it. It claims that dry fasting is 3 times stronger and 3 times faster than other kinds of fasting for things like detoxing and losing weight. But, and this is a huge but, it also says it's 3 times more dangerous. That's a trade-off you just can't ignore. And, that really sets the stage perfectly for our first section, which is all about this core idea, a dangerous promise. The source material isn't just selling this as some simple diet plan. No, it's presented as this high-stakes choice, a promise of this incredible transformation that also comes with some serious risks you have to respect. Now, before we get any deeper, the source itself is super clear about one thing, and we have to be too. This is not medical advice. It hammers on the point that anyone even thinking about this has to, and I mean has to, talk to a doctor first. So what we're doing here is just exploring the information in the guide, not handing out recommendations. Got it? Good.
Okay, so that disclaimer raises a massive question, right? How is this even possible? I mean, how can a person survive without any water? We're going to get into that in this next part, your body's hidden spring. The whole explanation in this guide really comes down to this one fascinating idea, that our bodies can actually make their own water from the inside.
And that internal water source, the guide calls it metabolic water. The idea is, when your body breaks down stuff like fats and proteins, it creates water as a byproduct. And what's the best fuel for making this water? Yep, body fat. This is the absolute core concept the source uses to argue that, a long dry fast is even survivable.
Okay, that's a cool concept, but it makes you wonder, is there any actual proof for this? This hydrating effect? Well, the source material points to a very specific animal study to back up its claim.
So this study they talk about involved zebra finches. Yeah, birds. They were split into 3 groups. You had your control group, which got food and water like normal. Then you had group 2, on a water fast, so they only got water. And then there was the third group, on a full-on dry fast, no food, no water. This setup allowed them to compare the effects directly. And this is where it gets really interesting. The result the source highlights is, well, it's pretty surprising. At the end of it all, the dry fasted birds were apparently more hydrated than the birds that were only drinking water. The guide's theory is that the body hangs on to its electrolytes and burns fat so well that it actually creates more water than it's using. Now, of course, we gotta remember, this was a study on birds. How that translates to humans, well, that's a huge question mark.
So that's the theory behind it all. But what does it actually feel like for a person? That brings us to our next section, surviving the keto flu. The source describes it as this journey with 2 very different stages. And believe me, it starts off rough. All right, so the first day, maybe 2 days, they're gonna be tough. It's what they call the keto flu. You're feeling drained, you're tired, you can't focus. This is where most people probably tap out. But the guide says if you can push through that, your body flips a switch. It starts burning fat, ketones for energy. And that's when you hit what it calls the Superman stage. Suddenly you've got all this energy and mental clarity. You feel on top of the world.
So how do you even know that switch has been flipped? The source points to one very specific, kind of weird physical sign: keto breath. It says the smell of your breath actually changes. It can be sweet or even smell a little like acetone. That's supposedly the big indicator that your body is officially in fat-burning mode. Okay, so now that we know the theory and what to expect, what are the actual rules of the road here? That brings us to part 4, the fasting rule book. This is where the guide gets into the nitty-gritty, the practical stuff for anyone thinking about this.
First up, a really key distinction is made depending on your body type. The source suggests that if you have more body fat, you're a better candidate, because that fat is basically the fuel to make your metabolic water. On the flip side, it warns anyone who's already very lean to be extremely careful and says they should only try super short fasts, if any.
The source uses this great analogy to explain how to manage this whole thing. It says to think of your body's water reserves like an underground aquifer. You're always using water, but your body is also refilling it through metabolism. The whole game, it says, is to manage that balance, to stay in a state of mild dehydration without letting that aquifer run totally dry.
And that idea connects directly to exercise. The guide is really clear on this. You have to avoid overdoing it. Hardcore workouts like running, forget about it. Instead, it recommends low-impact stuff like walking or yoga. The goal is to not drain your water reserves any faster than you have to.
Oh, and here's one last practical point from the guide, and it's a big one. What about electrolytes? So with water fasting, you can actually flush out minerals and get into trouble. But the source claims that on a dry fast, your body is much smarter about holding on to them. Because of that, it says you don't even need supplements.
So, we've gone through the how it works, the what it feels like, and the rules to follow. The guide kind of brings it all together under one final theme, which is our last section, power versus peril. It's all about walking that tightrope between the potential benefits and the very real dangers.
And honestly, this one phrase is sprinkled all through the source material. With great power comes great responsibility. That's really the big takeaway here. Dry fasting isn't presented as some casual diet you can just jump into. It's framed as this uniquely powerful tool that you absolutely have to handle with just as much knowledge and responsibility.
And that really just leaves us with this one last thought-provoking question for you to chew on. When we're talking about our health, where exactly do we draw the line between a powerful tool and just an unnecessary risk? Based on everything we've seen in this guide, that's a line that everyone has to think about very carefully.